So I'm excited about our next panel, where it's provocatively called War Games and Peace Plans, Geopolitics of a World on Edge. I'm particularly excited for our moderator, Vikram Chandra, founder of Editorgy Technologies. Vikram, I think, is an ideal person to transition from the last conversation we had about AI, given he has a media company that's really around personalized news using AI technologies and others, and probably has a lot to say about the last topic. Joining Vikram will be Nikhil Sawhney, Vice Chairman and Managing Director of Triveni Turbine. Vishal Kampani, Senior Vice President of AIMA and Vice Chairman and Managing Director of JM Financial. R. Mukundan, Managing Director and CEO of Tata Chemicals. Navneet Chugh, Managing Partner of Chugh LLP. And Banu Bargu, Professor of the History of Consciousness and an affiliated faculty member in the Department of Politics at UC Santa Cruz. Turn it over.
Thank you so much, John. And I'm going to try and lure everybody back here from the coffee by actually throwing this open to perhaps with a vote to start off. Because I'm going to try and use the collective wisdom of everyone in this room, seeing as we are talking about war games and we are talking about peace. I was just wondering if there's any consensus in this room as to who's going to get the Nobel Peace Prize later this week. Any names which I'm hearing out here? I heard some people saying Trump. How many people think that Donald Trump is going to get the Nobel Peace Prize later this week? Okay, a few hands going up. All right, fine. Let's turn back now to the subject at hand. You know, we've been doing this conference fairly frequently, and a couple of items at this conference for the last 5 or 6 years, there were two things that seemed to be emerging almost as consensus. Consensus point number one, we're moving away from an era of war. We're moving to a liberal order. We're moving to a world where we'll all be able to settle our differences without actually shooting each other or bombing each other. Clearly, that's been challenged a little bit. And the second consensus was that one of the things that you can bet the 21st century on, it is that India and the United States are going to be the best of friends and the closest of strategic partners, and everything is going to be done as a India-America partnership. And again, it's not necessarily going quite that well. So I'm going to actually kick this off by asking this entire panel, what's happened to derail both those premises and derail them so fast? Nikhil, you want to start? Then I'll go down that way.
Thanks. Thank you, Vikram. Firstly, it's a pleasure to be here, and hello to everyone. Vikram, you know, the fact is that when it comes to the current political situation and geopolitical situation, it's heavily driven by politics. I don't think it represents the aspirations of people. It's maybe an aberration, but it's an aberration which we have to deal with in the short term. I do fundamentally believe that we are not aligned towards a divergence of the economies, both in terms of interests as well as our aspirations. And people may say that this is unprecedented times, but we go through unprecedented times in different formats all the time over the past century. And we've had much larger situations of war, which we've overcome. I think, as other panels have said it, we share certain values, and especially when you look at it from a people-to-people connect, we know that over the course of generations and over the following years, that things will fall into place. Ultimately, democracies represent the aspirations of their people. And while there may be economic hurt at this point in time with the US populace, which Trump has picked up on, I feel that over the medium term, there will be a realization that India is a very good partner for the US, and it is beneficial for us to maintain that course.
Vishal, is it the era of war? Is it the era of peace? Because the markets seem to be pricing in that everything's great and the world's in wonderful shape.
Can I add something on that before Vishal comes in? Because we talked about this briefly. It's very surprising that you have a risk-on asset, which is Bitcoin, and a risk-off asset, which is gold, which are both hitting all-time highs.
Both are potentially hedges against the US dollar, so that would explain it. But yeah.
Yeah, so I'll take off from where Nikhil put it. I think clearly, from all that we've heard and we feel, this is a short-term political thing. India and US will both need each other. India may not be as important a trade partner for the US today, but increasingly over the next couple of years, it'll be a very important strategic trade partner for India. I mean, look at the amount of spend that's happening in AI, and we heard about that. I think India will be a very strategic partner for AI. A lot of the design work that happens in AI happens in India. And you look at spending in infrastructure, which will lead to manufacturing, and a large part of manufacturing is growing in India. So there are lots of reasons from a industry perspective why the US and India need to be friends. And we hope that this is going to be a blip. We feel this is going to be a blip. And the trade dynamics should be behind us very soon. And also, I think Indians have been exceptionally successful and well-to-do in the US. And again, the values which the Indians have is based on hard work, based on a very strong culture. And the cultures of hard work. It's about making sure that they're just not successful for themselves. They care about their families, and they want to make sure that India does as well. I mean, look at the amount of remittances the U.S. Indians have sent to India in the last decade. I mean, the last year's number was almost 130, 140 billion, which is a huge number. So in every form, I think there is a deep connect. And as Nikhil said, and we heard earlier, this should be a blip.
Mr. Chair, before we come to whether it's a blip or not, the fact is that many in the Indian diaspora here felt that they were very well settled, well assimilated, bit of a model minority, 1-2% of the population, paying 6% of the taxes, founding so many companies, especially here, contributing to jobs. Is there a sense that has changed, or is that still pretty much the way you think most people view it? Whatever's happening between the governments and on social media?
Well, Trump lives either in New York or DC or Florida. All those places are far away from California, so he doesn't know the contribution of the Indians. But I think this too shall pass. I've written a letter to Prime Minister Modi. He's not responding. But I said in my letter that we can't be a nation of Gandhi. You have to respond to a bomb with a bomb. And India needs to place a tariff of $500,000 for every engineer leaving India. We gave them birth. We raised them elementary, middle, high school engineering degree. And then 2-3 years of experience. Just when they're ready to contribute to their motherland, they end up in the United States. So in the employment agency world, there is a fee for perm placement, right? So India needs to charge $500,000, and that's when they'll realize the value of these Indian engineers that are coming. But I think a lot has changed in the world thanks to technology and social media. In the year 1500, for instance, the world population was 500 million, and the world GDP was $100 billion. Everybody was poor, which is fine. The secret to happiness is as long as you're making a buck more than your neighbor, right? How much do you make? and so...
Wrong person to actually ask that question if you want to be happy.
All right, I'm going to move. But now, from everybody being poor to now, the world GDP is 110 trillion, and 4 countries have half of it: US, China, Germany, Japan. And these 4 countries have only a quarter of the world's population, 2 billion. So now with technology and social media, 75% of the world's not happy in 188 countries. We can't live like we used to live anymore. The world wealth today is $500 trillion, and 1% of the world has half of it. And the other 7.9 billion people are saying, we have half, and these 56 million people have half. So this war is going to go on. 4% of the world lives in this country, and we have 25% of the world GDP. But obviously, Trump doesn't know about that, right? He thinks we're poor, we want more, we want more. No, we don't. We already have more than our fair share. Time to move on.
All right. I'm coming back to the dynamics of India-US and the hostility that we are seeing right now. Mukund, is it your view that it's it's going to get sorted out soon? Is it being overdone? Is there more hostility on social media and at the highest levels of the government than there is on the ground and between the people and certainly between companies?
See, I think there are two, three shifts which have happened. I think this is playing in those 2-3 shifts. It's an outcome of those 2-3 shifts. The first shift is, I think most countries have started to look inward. I think their domestic is driving the policy outward, then outward cooperation driving inward policy. I think there's an imbalance, which is the fulcrum has shifted slightly, and I think we should understand from both Indian perspective as well as from US perspective there is something which is playing out, and sooner we admit amongst everybody here and amongst the policy makers that that's a dynamic they need to deal with, they'll reach better solution. That's number one. The second, I think the shift in the way people perceived post-COVID became, you sort of embraced digital, but that also brought in this whole set of shift towards what I call as cultural ghettos, where you are in an echo chamber of your own, and it sort of reinforces that that's the need and that's the voice we need to have. I'm not saying which side is right or wrong, but I think that's the reality of the shift which has happened. And third is that there is a general view, which I think Navneet has already highlighted, that the other side has won. And I need to win if I have to feel better. I think that point about not moving towards a compromise is not just at the country level, it's gone down to, I think, within countries, various factions which are there, which sort of work through the polity. So these are three broad factors, in my view, which I think everybody is dealing with. It's not limited to business. It's not limited to politicians. Entire societies are dealing with it, and that dynamic will play out. Now you can ask a question: how will this impact U.S.-India? I think fundamentally, at the larger level, I think there will be some kind of a compromise reached, but that compromise will then have to adjust the realities within those constituents which we have. And fundamentally, we have to realize that the part which is in the power in both places have very strong constituents, which will hold them back, even though if the leadership wants to move, the constituents have a huge power in them itself. And I think it's very important that we figure out, and businesses, especially businesses where we come from, agree that they have to help these two people work together. The good news is, I think businesses realize it because we deal with customers every day, and customers walk away from our products. So we are, in fact, engaging with government to make sure that we can get there as quickly as possible. But this is an outcome of what has happened, which are three big shifts in the last few years.
Well, if I can just come to you as to the way the United States is actually viewing the world, and a lot of the recent interactions, especially with this administration and with the rest of the world, it's almost as if it has now become some sort of a zero-sum game where for the US to win, the other side has to almost be, I mean, humiliated is a strong word, but that sometimes come across in the dealings, whether it is with even allies like South Korea or Japan or Canada. There's almost a certain sense that you get the prestige by putting the other person down. And that happens. There are some people who will come and bend the knee and say, all right, fine, we'll try and appease as much as the White House as much as we can. And then there'll be other countries which will say we will not, and they'll push back. And then either it's a China, but then you have to try and adjust to them, or it's a country like India which says, no, we will also not bend the knee. But then there is still a temptation in the White House to say, let's push this and see how far it will go. Is that a fair interpretation of the way the White House seems to be interacting with the rest of the world?
I'm not sure if it's fair, but I think the portrait that you described is accurate. I'm a political theorist by training. I'm a humanist, and I study the history of political thought and contemporary thinking, and we tend to be pessimistic by nature, I think. Pondering about questions of justice and democracy and equality. And while you look at it historically, you see great improvements. from the point in time where we are, I think a lot of things appear much worse than they ought to be or they could be. There's a domestic dimension to this and there's an international dimension to this. Domestically, I think what we are seeing is a great erosion in democratic institutions. The sense that existing institutions do not articulate the people's will. Representatives do not represent what people want them to represent. And the accountability and authority of the people being undermined. In the international sphere, you see a situation where international organizations that are designed, especially after the Second World War, to increase cooperation, to address issues that are cross-cutting, even if they don't cut evenly, those are also not reflective of some of the realities of politics today. And even though a lot of lip service is paid to international law and the sovereignty of nations, you see that there are lots of discrepancies. And the problem here then is to address how institutions, both at the domestic level and at the international level, can be improved, can be revised, can be rethought to represent both people's aspirations and the kind of expectations from power that come not simply as a kind of pure power politics like might makes right, but that comes with certain values that inspire legitimacy and leadership. So on that front, I think there's much wanting.
At the end of the day, the political component of this is important. I mean, you should always say that, you can always say that, well, you've got to look at foreign policy devoid of politics, but politics comes into it. And sometimes the gestures and the steps that you could say, well, let's diffuse this present situation by going and making a apologetic phone call, for example, to Donald Trump, or say, no, you do deserve a Nobel Peace Prize because you mediated the war with Pakistan, or whatever it is. But sometimes in other democracies, that's very difficult to do, those political steps. And that makes the problem worse.
Well, yes, I think it could have possibly helped with Trump's ego if India had
So egos and politics comes into it at some point.
Well, that's democracy, but I feel that those short-term democratic whims don't play out over the medium term. I think that they will get smoothened out. I think the point that you brought out about lack of values is exceedingly important because the United States held this moral value in the world. And I think that has been eroded. But that's a problem I think America needs to address in terms of its position. I feel that there will be a reaction which will moderate things going forward. But just to come back to the point, which I think that from business's perspective, the irony is that we have a unit in Houston and we do some work there, but it was contingent on supply from India to sort of bridge some of the solutions that we needed to execute in the United States. The irony is that instead of supplying it from India, we're now getting it from China because it's just cheaper and the duty is less. And so while it's allowed us to be more flexible as a company, I think that's important for us to realize that in this age of uncertainty, you need to future-proof yourself by being more asset-light, being more dynamic, being able to cater to risk in a much more dynamic manner. And I think that's how we deal with the political uncertainty that democracies create.
Just coming to the economic rationale behind a lot of this, because obviously tariffs are at the face of it what is driving it. And the tariffs, the justification for a lot of this is the clear view being taken by the White House and by President Trump that the rest of the world is ripping us off. The fact that we are running deficits with them is the rest of the world ripping us off. Now there are others who would say, well, actually it's quite the opposite. It's great if the US is the reserve currency and is paying with pieces of paper for real goods and services coming in from elsewhere. Well, how would you characterize that?
Well, that's a tough one. You see, the U.S., after the Alan Greenspan put, I go back to 2000, 2001, after the dot-com crisis, you've had sort of regulators or, central banks who've tried to manage or smoothen business cycles. So you see this level of debt that you see in the U.S. is all sort of linked to management of business cycles. So, you had a huge GFC and a financial crash in the US in 2008, but you had a very quick recovery, right? The same thing happened in the dot-com crash, the GFC crash, COVID, and it's all been printing of money. And because of a huge amount of productivity gains that the US has seen in the last 2 or 3 decades, you've had extraordinary GDP growth, and it's been the biggest exporter of tech all over the world. And this is all from this place right here. So today, there is a need for the US to continue on that growth path. Whether the steps Trump is taking or the US government is taking are the right steps or not is hard to say. Whether it will really boost manufacturing in the US because you slap tariffs on all the countries that are exporting to you is hard to say. Does anyone really want to go and work in a manufacturing company in the US? I don't know the answer. Maybe you guys know better. But the fact is that he has to find sources of revenue. He has to find long-term sources of revenue. And on the productivity side, his big bet, US's big bet, is AI. And AI better play out, and in terms of productivity, and let the growth of the US continue above the addition of debt. So it's really hard to give an answer to that today. But it seems like it's more tact and less strategy, while what I think the US would need right now is more long-term strategy and less tact.
I know you said California is far away from Washington, D.C., but is there a sense that at least some of what's happening, the past so many decades have actually been a really good period, by and large, for the United States. It's been a single superpower, it's had a control over the entire world, it's had a period of considerable prosperity. The world has, by and large, been okay with American leadership after the Cold War. Is there a sense that some of that is now going away into a somewhat more uncertain world where, yes, there's a new competitor rising in China, and some of the countries that have been friends and allies of the US, now they are scratching their head and figuring out where to go. Is there a sense of that when you talk to people out here?
There is a sense, and there is comedy. But I think TTSP, this too shall pass. And the last 2,500 years, India, US, and China have been 50% of the world GDP, except for the 250 years of colonization. And that will continue for the next 100 years. 3 countries, US and India and China, will remain 50% of the world GDP no matter what. But for us, 1.4 billion people of India, Vikram, we need to forget about what's going on in the United States. We need to grow up. We need to take care of our life and ignore this country for at least 3.5 years. But we have issues. We were the richest country in the world for 1,750 years, and we need to get that back. We don't want more than our fair share. From year 1 to 1750, we had 25% of the world GDP and 25% of the world's population. We just want that back. We're 17% of the world's population now, but 5% of the world GDP. That's a loss of $12 trillion per year, $1 trillion per month. That we're making it happen. We can blame the world or we take responsibility, but we need to fix it. The dive down from 1750 to 1991, where we lost 25% of world GDP to became 2.5%, the dive down was 241 years. The climb back up must happen faster. And this group right here, if you, 1,000 years from now, people are going to say, who made the climb back up happen? This group, look at yourself. We need to make that climb back up happen, and it's not that difficult. It's very easy if you think about it, if we let it happen. You can ask the 100 smartest people in the world, to get together and come up with 10 solutions on how do we get back to our share of the world GDP, 17%. It's not that difficult, but we need to do it. And this disruption, this distraction will cost India a truckload of money. Maybe it's being done on purpose, but we cannot pay attention to anything that's happening in the United States. When I go to India, it feels like I'm in the 51st state of United States. Front page of every newspaper in India, your television show, Vikram, is talk about United States. Every day I see pictures of Jennifer Lopez in Times of India. What's going on?
All right. I mean, I haven't actually done a TV show in a long, long time. But the point, actually, it's very interesting you said that, because what we have been talking about the podcast for the last 5 weeks running is almost exactly what you said, that focus on what India needs to do. And let me get you in, Mr. Mukhandan, on that particular note, because there is a strong view in India, in fact, which is somewhat echoing what he said, that forget about the US just for the moment, because why has India not reacted that much to the tariffs? Why has India not been calling up the White House and running? Because a lot of people feel that, all right, exports to the US are X amount. A certain number of industries will get hurt, textiles, gems, and the rest of it. But maybe this crisis is the time for India to fix some of the problems that are there, do the next generation reforms that are there, get growth moving faster. A lot of those internal things can be done. Don't waste a good crisis. Do some of that and you can actually grow much faster. Actually, to his point, from 1991 to here, it's been like 34 years. India has actually gone back from 20th in the world in GDP to about 4th, right? I mean, to 4, and maybe will move faster if you can take advantage of this crisis.
So, Vikram, I think we should take advantage of the crisis. I agree with you. But I think it's not either or, in my view. It's not abandon the West and embrace yourself internally and then focus internally. I think that's then falling into the same paradigm which you want to avoid. So to a large extent, I think what the government has done in terms of focusing on fixing its tax system, fixing its whole ease of doing business, cost of doing business, and a lot more needs to be done, as Sunil highlighted. I think we should continue that journey. Continue and, in fact, speed up, accelerate the journey, because if you really look, what are we competing with? It is not with United States. This happens to be free market like us. Actually, we are also competing with a very structured competitor who has got a very structured approach to the way they do business, China. We don't live in a world which is in vacuum. And I think if we don't prepare ourselves for the big competition is going to unfold in future, I think we'll not win. And this is not about one or another. And we will cooperate with China too, I can tell you that. I mean, in my view, I think we must be, as we said, multi-aligned, multi-focused, but internally strong. So what do we need to fix? I think we need to fix the ease of doing, cost of doing business. We need to fix our education. A lot more needs to be done. If you look at top 100 universities, at least 20 should feature from India. We need to fix our healthcare, because I think it's not just healthcare for all, but also higher standards of healthcare. So there are lots of other issues we need to fix. Having said that, I think we need to engage. We need to find out what are the points of friction and address them with each country which matter. I don't think you need to go down to pinpoint on 170 countries in the in the UN to deal with it. But at least with the top 6, 7, 8 countries, you just cannot ignore the fact that you need them as partners in progress. And definitely, US being the largest country, it's a biggest partner in progress for India. And likewise, at some point, I think every other country will go through this churn, addressing internal and focusing on external. So I think we are at a good moment. I think it's sort of shaken us from a slumber that somehow we will get to the top on our own, because the sail, wind is in our sail, because US wants somebody which is going to be anti some other country. And we've been always saying, in fact, within Tata Group, we've always been saying this, that it is not China plus one. For us, it is India plus one. We have to be plus one to everybody. We have to be India acting as plus one to US, India acting as plus one to China, India acting as plus one to EU. We must partner with each one of them individually, and we should not bother about what other interests they have, what other issues they have. So I think we're doing the right thing. Our External Affairs Minister has set out the policy right, and I think we need to follow through. And the response of the Indian government by not falling into what I think the media is doing. He spoke about the media which only shows Jennifer Lopez, but I think that's not what we are interested in. I think the government has been saying, listen, I think we need to have a quiet diplomacy. Diplomacy is not negotiated in media. And I think even businesses, we do track too, we are not going in the media and talking about it. We're engaging with people who matter and giving them the solutions which matter. We know what the friction points are, and they have to be overcome. And hopefully they will.
When we're looking at the path ahead, I think there is still a sense that it's a very different world, because perhaps more than any time in the recent past, there seems to be a perception that might is right in the world order today, whether it is Russia and Ukraine, whether it's what's happening in the Middle East, whether it's happening. So the big, strong, powerful countries will get their way. Build your national strength. If you have got a big economy and you've got a big military, you'll get your way. And if you don't have that, it's going to be very, very difficult for you. Is that the way you see the global order going in the world heading?
So I cannot beat the invocations of Jennifer Lopez in my answer, but, and I remember this little anecdote that her dress, the green dress, was one of the most Googled photos ever. But I want to invoke, to answer your question, I want to invoke a different image. And this was the image that was taken by the astronauts on Apollo 8. The space investments of India were invoked in the previous panels today, and maybe it also circles back to that. In 1968, this image that was transmitted showed what is called the Earthrise, from the desolate surface of the moon, seeing the planet Earth in full color and glory rise. And the astronaut Jim Lovell is reported to have said to Mission Control, "The Earth from here is a grand oasis in the big vastness of space." Why I invoke this image? It's because I think by seeing the planet Earth from an external perspective for the first time, I mean, there are some previous pictures, but that became the iconic one. I think there happened a big shift in a kind of consciousness. I would say it's the emergence of a kind of planetary consciousness. It's very new. I mean, 1968, it's not very long ago. But I think that's a momentous shift, and we're still grappling with the effects of that. How to be of different communities, of different ethnicities, of different religions, of different nations, and yet have this sense that we belong to the same planet. And I think to go back to your question, we need to also consider that while power politics takes its course, that transformation in our sensibilities as planetary subjects, as planetary citizens, also has an impact. And perhaps if there's some room for optimism, maybe it lies there.
I mean, I certainly hope that's correct, and I hope people will have that sense. And maybe aliens will come and they'll force us to, start thinking as a planet. Or maybe ASI will come and force us to start thinking as, humans in some sense. But till that happens, are we actually heading for a world which is going to have a lot more wars, a lot more tension, and some sort of a renewed Cold War between the US and China? And that's where countries will have to make their choices.
Vikram, while I said that I think that the Trump trade policy is an aberration, but it exists within longer-term trends. There's a very clear trend towards AI. I think it's been spoken about a lot in terms of the impact that it's going to have. There's also a very clear trend towards a greater degree of sustainability and climate change, etc. I know that this current administration doesn't have a clear view on that, but you can see that in the actions of countries where the importance of independence, of any policy, independence, security, and sustainability. So it's energy sustainability, energy security, energy independence. Same thing with defense. Same thing with a variety of different factors. That degree of insulation countries will try to foster while still looking to collaborate and partner in different areas. I think that's the type of era that we're in. I feel that the wars that are currently on in the world are wars that are convenient for people to live with. Political leaders, not for citizens. I imagine everyone here is very discomforted by the wars that are happening globally, but political leaders are willing to live with it. And so I don't see wars growing to a level where there may be another world war. There will always be a conflict, I think, between the United States and China because of the hegemony that the US has enjoyed for so many years. But I feel that businesses will adapt and tolerate, but as citizens, we shouldn't be that pessimistic.
So coming from a geopolitical lens, and any and all of you feel free to answer that. I guess still earlier this year, if somebody had said that where would India stand in this, it would be pretty clear that India would always pick the United States over China because, obviously it's a strategic challenge from China, and I think that's probably still the case. What India would probably prefer the most is some sort of a multipolar world where you get back to what you were describing as the historic trend where India has been one of the poles along with China and one of the others. Is that where you think some tension is going to continue to come with the US, where India is going to try and be more independent and say, no, we are going to have our relationship with Russia and we are going to buy oil from XYZ and we're not going to be a vassal of some sense?
So I think, frankly, the US and most countries knew that India was buying oil for a significant period of time from Russia. It wasn't just the last couple of months. I think if you look at the wars in the world today, they are problems of those countries for a significant period of time, right? So whether it's Russia, whether it's Israel, and what's going on in those countries, and they're not trade related. I think Mukund made a very important point on that every country, and especially countries like India, want to get more Atmanirbhar and more strong internally, but you cannot have that at the cost of trade. I think global trade is very important to keep global peace. And while countries get stronger, they have to trade more. And as long as they trade more and there's dependence between them, there will be less wars. So I feel you may reach a point where actually these wars may end faster than we think. And as Nikhil made a point that there is a rise of gold, there's a rise of silver, there's a rise of crypto that we've seen in this year, and I think these are all peaking in my view. And we've seen this play out many times in the past. And if you talk to a student of history and economic history, he'll probably tell you this is peaking. And I'm optimistic. I think next year you'll probably see the end of these wars.
Well, let's hope you're right. Let me just try and get some questions in from the audience. Yeah.
Amazing conversations. So I have two questions. One in general for the panel, which is the easiest off-ramp from this logjam is a candid conversation between the two leaders, and I think it is, but I might be quixotic. And the second question is really for Navneet. So Navneet, when you mention that India's GDP was possibly 2/5 to half of the world for a long time, it's because of the golden roads that ran from India to West first, and then from India to the East first. So if we actually close India, do you think we can regain that particular position? So I agree with Mukundan that we need to actually establish good trade relations with all the countries around. So I wanted to get your reaction to that.
You want him to go for the second? I'll go for the first and give the mic to him. Yeah. So I think, we are sitting outside. We don't know what's happened inside. We are speculating. And I think we are using words which are very strong, even in this room, which are only increasing the temperature. For example, I heard someone use the term vassal. I mean, nobody's vassal. I think these are sometimes conversations which are going on, and I think we are interpreting the way we need to interpret, because someone feels hurt, someone feels that's absolutely fine. I think these things happen. In my view, I don't think that's really. I think where we are, in my view, I have a different view, is because of candid conversations. It has been on the table. These are not hidden. The red lines are known. And I think there's a problem in overcoming the red lines, pushing each other. I think this is absolutely fine in a negotiation. I mean, I have seen, you pick a two company in Bay Area when they negotiate with each other. I mean, you go and look at the biggest company, which starts with A. The founder of that company, how he treated some of the other companies. It's all up there. So I think this is part of the way the progress happens, because there's a perception that where I fit in and where you fit in are different. And I think we should not lay too much emphasis. But I think everyone knows what the limits are. And for India especially, I think the issue is like this. I think going back to the point which Vikram raised, I think we have a neighborhood and we have a bunch of neighbors. We can't just not have a good act with them at all. I think that's a given imperative. The second imperative is that I think we have got a long-standing relationship with at least one country in Europe who may have colonized us, but we can't now live in the whole misery, why did you colonize? No, we got to use them as a pathway to progress. And third, I think we have had a deep cultural ties, at least the southern part of India where I come from, with entire ASEAN and further down right up to Korea. So we can't forget those cultural pieces, right? And lastly, I think we also cannot but reach out to this part of the world, which actually somebody found looking for India. So end of the day, I think it's very clear that we have to tie ourselves. But these are parts of conversations which will carry on. I mean, you go and look at the way, I think if you look at this is humiliation or whatever, I think when Indira Gandhi came here to seek help, and the way Nixon treated her, if the social media was alive today, I think in India there would be riots, total riots. But I think there was no social media then. I think we are giving it too much of a importance than what it is due. These are things which leaders do when they negotiate with each other, but now they're in public view, and we are aghast. But this happens in families, I can tell you. Go home, you'll see that.
Well, I think Columbus was headed to India in 1492 for a reason, right? And we have to think about those reasons. And I think India should trade with all 192 countries in the planet. We need to get back to 17% of the world GDP, no matter what. If we need to bomb other countries, we need to bomb other countries. Does not matter. The US didn't.
I'm not entirely sure how that gets you to 17% GDP.
I was just about to answer that. The US didn't become #1 country in the world without bombing countries, right? And so.
But if I add to that, the US got to become the strongest military power in the world because of Silicon Valley. Because if US didn't have the chips to actually fire accurately, like they lost the Vietnam War, they won the Persian Gulf purely because of Silicon Valley, and that edge is still there in the US. So it's foolhardy to think that India will be able to bomb its way or get to the 17% GDP growth. India also has its own share of issues. And
At least that woke up everyone.
Yeah. So India will deliver when pushed to a wall. It has a track record of doing better when pushed to a wall. But partnership with the US is important. It's critical, and it should get resolved.
I think we almost out of time. 2 more questions. Yeah, first you. Yeah.
We're here.
Yeah. So, one issue which is not covered is the financial architecture. Navneet made a point we should ignore what's happening here and then focus on India. But, the reserve currency of the world and the financial architecture where we are tied, and also the debt problem in the US is not a go away. And the Plaza Accord of Japan is sort of a warning sign. So, the debt problem here has to be fixed in some form. And so is India going to be part of the solution? How are we going to deal with it? Because we cannot walk away from that problem of the financial architecture.
I mean, there are some people who would say that that's a sign for a weak dollar and what are BRICS going to do, and India has been actually helping the US dollar there in BRICS.
Well, yeah. So I think there clearly is a debt problem in the US. I mean, it's very visible. At the same time, the US is a very important growth engine in the world, and it's still being able to grow at a significantly high rate. And it all depends on growth. I mean, as I said, the whole bet. So if you look at the world, there are basically three growth engines in the world today, right? There's AI, and then there's global defense spending, and there is a whole new infrastructure needed in many countries, including the US. And that infrastructure will require more manufacturing because you're going to require more steel, you're going to require more cement, you're going to require hordes of things which the US doesn't make. So, and that's what, there is some policy somewhere who's advising Washington that, listen, we need to manufacture because there's going to be a lot of infrastructure growth. There is AI spending which brings in productivity. And there's defense spending where US takes the lead. So I won't rule this out as much. I think I feel I'm more bullish on the US than most people are, despite the debt problem.
Yeah, let me add a point to what he has said. I think when you look at currencies and stuff like that, I think you're dealing with something which is real, also which is subjective. I think we tend to think everything is real, but actually currency is subjective. The power of a currency depends on the power of confidence the rest of the world has. I think that power comes from transparency, that power comes from governance, which you highlighted. And despite all its flaws, I think we can, see, we always look inside and we feel we are the worst in the world. Despite all the flaws, I think US still is probably more transparent. US probably is also better governed, despite all the problems you have. And I think we must not forget also it's the biggest economy with the biggest growth engines on all, two of them at least, on defense spending as well as on AI tech. And increasingly, US will have to spend on infrastructure too, because we see this is like when you come through airports, we know a lot needs to be fixed here. But having said that, I think the power of currency comes from these two. And I think there'll always be a bunch of people who will say, you can't dig some mineral metal out of the earth and say, this is going to be reserve. It's only that long it can continue. You can't mine something in digital world and say, there's a place for all of them, but there's also a place for where it is. So I think I would not bet against this even now. And I think we should continue to say that till better governance, better transparent alternative comes on the world. Look at euro, the kind of trouble, the other currencies, and look at renminbi or yuan. So I think we need to look at it in relative terms, and there's a place for US dollar.
All right, let me get the last two questions in, and then we can wrap.
I'll try and make it very quick. So it sounds like there's an overwhelming consensus on this panel, except for maybe Navneet, that the global peace, the most pragmatic way to achieve global peace is through trade and partnerships and pragmatism, right? And then Vikram earlier mentioned something about like might makes right? So there's a famous school of thought being championed by people like Ray Dalio, which is about the emergence and the subsidence of global powers. First it was the Spanish, and then it was the French, then it was the English, then it was the American 2 centuries, and now it's going to be the Chinese next 1 century. So the idea that they promote is that every time when there's a transition of global power, when there's a shift in center of gravity from one part of the world to the other, the world becomes a noisier place. So my question to the panel, which is at least the members of the panel who are arguing for peace through trade sentiment, like what if trade itself becomes a tool of geopolitical arm twisting? Like how do you expect to achieve
exactly
peace
what's
through that?
happening right now.
So let me address this in a very, you know Indian mythology, right? Yeah. Now, if you look if you come to a religion, there's only one God, you will say, it's going to be China century, it is going to be US century. But really, we in India used to pantheon of gods. So this is a century of pantheon of countries. So just let me leave it there.
Okay, last question.
So I'm going to ask an entirely different question. I've been here 60 years. I've seen ups and downs. And our community in US, Silicon Valley, has tried very, very hard to really do well, contribute here. And we thought that we are going to have some political influence. But what is happening, and I don't know what is the right answer, is our leaders are finding it hard to say anything. They seem to be afraid that if they did say something, something very bad could happen to our community. So my question to all of you, what should Indians do who are in leadership positions, whether they are in business, whether they are in any field, healthcare, wherever, what should they be doing? Should they be quiet?
So let me have him address it, but let me tell you my view, which is my personal view. If you have taken an oath of allegiance to country, you must work for that country. It doesn't matter where you come from. Okay, so that's my view. I think I don't expect the voices from here to come to our aid. I've taken an oath of allegiance to India. I will work for it. But I expect everyone else who has taken an oath of allegiance to this country to bat for this country.
We have allegiance to this country, but should we not speak up in whatever we
So his point is that you can't speak about an issue even if you have allegiance, even if your primary allegiance is to the US, if you think it is not in America's interest to be fighting with a close strategic ally like India, you could presumably voice that view.
Yeah, but don't expect that, because see, the way you positioned your question is in itself a problematic way. You'll reflect about the way I have an origin in a country, and because of my origin, I must fight for where I come from. No, that's the way. I would rather not say that. I would say that if you feel a cause is just, irrespective of which country against whom the issue is, I think you should fight for just cause, in my view. It does not matter. Perfect. Go ahead.
I think you have to figure what's home for you. If this is home for you and it's truly home, you have to fight for what's home, right? And what's right for your home.
But if I could play devil's advocate out here, what if you're home somewhere and you had disagreeing with a particular policy? I mean, I could disagree with XYZ policies that India is doing. It doesn't mean that I'm not having allegiance to India on that one issue.
Well, I think Columbus was looking for India and found US. So from an intellectual property point of view, everything in this country belongs to India.
All right, fair enough. Are you going to go and tell that to Jensen Huang, or should I?
Well, I think he's got a right point, and I know why he's saying it, because the big Indians in town aren't saying anything. They can't, because they have a duty to their shareholders. So if these guys stand up and say something, then billions of market cap will be lost. But they're leaving vacuum for retired people like you to say.
There you go. Thank you all so much for a really, really lively session. Let's see where
Thank you.